Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit more about the body, as this is the Embodiment Podcast. I mean, you said earlier that, and flow can make us not feel the body. So I've had that experience of being really engaged in my work, and not noticing I needed the toilet until I was almost peeing my pants. And then as an embodiment person, I'm like, oh shit, I have all this. But then also, I've also seen that people that have high levels of body awareness, and tell me if this is true or not, seem to enter flow easier. Like there's a reason yoga's popular.
So one, people with a high level of self-awareness, right? Body, psyche, all of it, to enter more flow more easily. You need self-awareness to do this work. You need to be able to figure out what's going on inside. We also know flow has an embodied trigger. We call it deep embodiment. And Csikszentmihalyi wrote about it originally. Back in the 60s and 70s, he noticed that people could get into flow through bodily activity. Now, let me tell you what is not 100% certain. I talked about how novelty, complexity, unpredictability, and sort of were flow triggers cognitively. What we may call embodiment may actually be the physical version of novelty, complexity, unpredictability, right? Like that. So it may be the same thing, right? You notice a novel sensation, or let me give you a simple example. In skiing, snowboarding, weightlessness is a big flow trigger. And the reason is, right, you jump off something, it's a massive, we're gravity bound creatures. So when you're freaking flying, right, it's a massive, like that. So that will immediately drive a lot of people into flow. Is it the novelty? Is it that physical novelty that's doing it? Or is it something else that's just bodily sensation? Nobody's entirely sure, mostly because I don't think we know how to, deep embodiment is a very this is the sort of cutting edge of neuroscience right now, as you know, and physiology. So do we exactly know how to measure all this stuff yet? No, I don't think we're there, but certainly physical stuff gets us in. It's another reason the action sport athletes had such an easy time getting in. These are totally embodied sports.
Yeah, the physiology that comes with movement and embodied practice pushes one in the direction of flow, which is, I guess, why it's still easier for a snowboarder to get it than an office worker in that sense, because they're physiologically priming themselves, surely, right?
Well, and by the way, if an office worker wants more flow, right, one way to seek it is by picking up some of these embodied sports, right? Because first of all, flow is a focusing skill, essentially. So when you get flow skiing or in the gym or studying martial arts or dancing or any of those things, you're going to get more flow at work because you're training your brain to focus in a specific way. And that's just neuroplasticity and myelination and all that stuff. So there is crossover, provided you can create the same conditions in the work environment that, you know what I mean?
Nice. Have you looked at the connection between adult development, kind of Ken Wilber, Keegan, people like that, and flow? It seems like you're mostly working with state rather than trait. So is it that
I'm not a huge Wilber fan, because I think he is a little too cult leadery for me and a little too new age spiritual for me in a way that I'm not comfortable with. But I wrote a lot about Keegan's work, and I've done a lot of work on the Harvard Adult Development Project data and all that stuff. Stealing Fire talks about Keegan's work and the Harvard Adult Development Project in particular. So there's interesting work that does say that repeated access to flow will help you move farther, faster up the adult development scale, but you got to still do the homework, right? And the homework, adult development homework is really weird. Like I was talking about this yesterday, if you haven't figured out how to get paid for what you love by the age of 40, you're kind of screwed thereafter. If you haven't figured out how to forgive all the people who have done you wrong by 50, you're kind of screwed thereafter. There are these milestones in development that are really peculiar, and I don't know how they work with flow, but as a general rule, more flow will sort of push you a little farther up the adult development scale. But as you pointed out, shit's not guaranteed. Otherwise, every surfer would be a Buddha. And that's certainly not the case. Not the case. Right. Yeah. That's not the case.
Yeah. For me, it's often flow states seem like a glimpse of higher developmental levels. At least gives me a direction to be aiming for and a taste of something, which I can then do the sort of hard work to move towards. That's kind of my sense of it, but I don't have a strong opinion there. Ken's a good guy. Give Ken another chance. He's a good guy.
Okay.
But, okay. So
and by the way, it may not actually be Ken. It may be all the people who run around spouting Ken Wilber. Yeah. It's probably like Ken is. You're totally right. Probably it's probably not Ken. He's probably a good guy. And I would probably like him.
Got a good sense of humor, and he's very loving. I like him a lot. And some of the Wilburites need to get laid. That's a fact. So it's
you heard it here first.
That's the truth. Okay, so what surprised you with this new book, with sort of new research you're doing? This stuff's been around a little while now. Like, what surprised you? What's the kind of thing that was like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, or wow, I'm glad I've got a new book coming out so I can put this in.
So let me talk to the two places this book came from, because it's a really good spin-off of what we're doing. So I've been training people in flow a long time. I think there's an argument to be made that nobody has actually done more of this work in the world in terms of training people in flow than I have at this point. And what I started to notice, and this was a while ago, let's say 10 years ago, it turns out if you understand flow's triggers and you understand the map, the flow cycle, you can get dangerous fast. Like I can get a 60, 70, 80% boost in the amount of flow you're experiencing in your life really easily. That's not surprising. But what I discovered is it's really hard for non-peak performers to sustain it. Like when I was training up the Navy SEALs or Olympic athletes or even C-suite executives, they could do this stuff. I would onboard all this shit. They would learn it and they were good to go and they would just go. But most everybody else, there was a substantial return to baseline. They'd get a bunch of flow and then it would they'd plateau, it would drop off, it would get cut off. And when you're dealing with the most addictive state on earth that is really pleasurable and meaningful, right? Let's just say there was some pissed off customers. You know what I mean? Just like not a good plan for a business, right? It's sort of like, here, let me sell you some crack cocaine. And by the way, the supply is cut off in 3 months.
Yeah, I was gonna say, bad,
you know what I mean?
Right there, bad drug.
It's so I took a really long time trying to figure out. I was like, well, what the hell is going on? What is going on? What is going on? And I started to realize it wasn't flow. It was all the things that flow amplifies. Like if you don't have all your motivation, there's 5 big intrinsic motivations. If you don't have them dialed in, there's 6 different grit skills. Literally, biologically, they all seem to need to be trained differently. There's 3 tiers of goal setting, right? There's no more, like it's a fixed set, but like this is what exists. And like, if you don't have that shit or learning, we talk for the reason, if you don't know how to learn quickly, right? You just never learn the skills. You don't know how to read books to absorb knowledge, or you don't know how to do the physical things for skill acquisition along the way. Or you don't have a truth filter, right? Like whether it's a scientific method or investigative journalism, like some way of evaluating what you're learning very quickly, all those things, you can't stay in the challenge skills sweet spot, right? And you're going to crash off that cliff. Same thing with creativity. Flow massively amplifies creativity. But dude, if you don't have good creative problem solving, decision making skills, every tangent seems like a genius idea, and you're going to write like 50 crappy novels before you know what I mean? Like, so I started to realize, I was like, oh my God, like a car going 10 miles an hour, you dent the fender when you hit the tree. But if you're going 100 miles an hour and you hit the tree, you've got a big problem. And that's what was happening. And so I was like, oh, wow, I don't have to just, what was surprising was it just wasn't flow. It's sort of this larger suite. Right. I mean, you know what I mean? I didn't realize how, like it was one of those things where you notice a little bit and then you start seeing more of it and you start seeing more of it. And then you're like, oh my God, it's categorical. I can, like, if you're going up the flow, getting more flow in your life, getting more flow than I've, and it gets cut off, I can literally use this information to be it's a diagnostic. I can tell you where you went wrong and what's missing, blah, blah. So that was sort of huge and surprising, those slow developing. But that's really, I think, one of the things that was at the heart of the work in the book. One of the big surprises. The other one is, and I think you're going to totally appreciate this. This isn't really a big surprise, but it may be surprising to most people. In 30 years of studying this stuff, I have come to the conclusion that not only are we hardwired to go big, but here's the craziest thing. Not going big turns out is really bad for us. So the system is designed to work in a certain way. For example, lining up intrinsic motivation, producing a lot of flow, all the stuff we've been talking about. If you look at the 8 biggest causes of depression, and there are 8 major causes of depression, and then like the next one down, the 9th one is tiny. It's not even really there. 2 of them are trauma and genetics, right? Those are the ones we hear about. The other 6 are literally getting the peak performance equation wrong. If you don't have autonomy, if you don't have lack of meaningful work is one of the major drivers of depression. What is lack of meaningful work? It's a lack of passion, a lack of purpose, lack of autonomy to pursue that purpose, and a lack of flow as a result, right? And so forth and so forth and so forth. So like the shocking thing that sort of came out of this work is the realization at a neurobiological level that not going big is bad for us. Yeah. We're designed for this.
Yeah. I said to someone who's depressed, I said, are you sick or do you just hate your life? There's a difference. Okay. So we had to talk about trauma. That's another one I'd love to get into. We don't really have time now. Where do people find the book? Let's just put that and say the name of the book.
The Art of Impossible. So artofimpossiblebook.com. You can also come in through stevenkotler.com if you want to learn more about the Flow Research Collective and the work we do. Flow Research Collective.com. And the book's available, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, every bookstore you could possibly go to. Support your indies, et cetera, et cetera.
Steven, this is fun. I definitely had some micro flow at times. The hour's gone by. I hope you had a little bit of flow while we were chatting. I'm not used to guests who work at the same speed as I do, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I hope it was a good time for you too.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you so much for your interest. I appreciate it.